Well, it is my pleasure to be here this morning with you. When I received the invitation to actually speak in this series, there had been a topic that I had been wanting to study for quite a while, waiting on the Lord. And so I pondered it for a little bit, and I decided, all right, that's what I'm going to devote my summer to, is looking at this particular concept. And that's what we want to do in the next 2 weeks. So we're going to begin that this morning. We're going to continue that into next week. And the word wait has a lot of different emotions that it can bring about in us. When we think in terms of waiting in line or waiting in traffic, it has a rather negative emotion that it might bring, and we just want to get to the end of it. But waiting usually implies this prolonged period of being denied something that we so desperately want. Now, how desperately want that, it depends. If we're waiting in line to buy stamps, we just want to buy stamps, right? And so it's just an irritation. But if you're waiting for a heart transplant and your next breath depends on that, that's a little bit different kind of waiting. But there's also a waiting that's really positive. I remember the day when I said to my wife, I have a tendency to just call her up and say, hey, you want to go get lunch? And she'll say, I'm getting ready to take the trash out, or, whatever. She's busy doing something. And so one day I said to her, why don't you enjoy the fact that your wonderful husband takes time out of his day and calls you and wants to be with you? And she kind of looked down, and anytime she looks down, I get a little nervous. And she looked down and she said, well, I would rather plan for a date with you. I would like to look forward to that. Maybe circle it on the calendar, Dave. You see, I'm worth looking forward to. And that's a positive way of looking at wait, right? It's worth the wait. We have phrases like that. It's worth the wait. And so there can be a real positive sense of looking forward to something. But oftentimes, it's negative. We even try to soften the term just a little bit. Instead of saying wait, we'll say, wait just a minute. And that's supposed to soften it because of waiting has this negative feel to it. But waiting on the Lord, what does that mean in a biblical sense? What does that mean for us as believers? What does the Bible teach us? Is it just nothing time? Is it just waiting? Is it idle? Do we find a prayer closet somewhere and wait for the Lord to do something? What does the Bible teach us about this? And so from a biblical perspective, I want us to consider this, and it's anything but passive. That's what we're going to find. It's not nothing time. It's not like standing in line and twiddling our thumbs. I want to give you a definition. And then what I want us to do is begin looking at Scripture and unpack that a little bit. And it's going to take us 2 weeks to do it. This week we're going to look at the first part of this definition, and then in the future we want to look at the second part of the definition. But here's the definition I want us to consider. As I've looked through the different passages in the Old Testament on this concept of wait on the Lord, this definition is what I want to finally conclude. And I'm going to use the word movement. In the midst of difficulty, waiting on the Lord is a movement of the heart away from. Now that's a renouncing, a repenting of, a destruction of. It's a movement away from taking matters into our own hands, but it's also a movement toward, and this would be an embracing, an affirmation of, or a confidence in, a movement of the heart toward the person and work of the Lord. In other words, it's not putting matters into our own hands, it's putting matters into His hands. But look at the last little bit of this definition as well. Even though the difficulty may not subside. And that becomes very important in this particular definition. What I want us to do is look at a few passages so I can show you how I came up with that definition. And then I want to pull out some significant points. There's going to be 4 in all. We're going to look at 3 today, focusing on the movement away from. And then we'll look at 1 next week, focusing on the movement toward. And next week we're going to spend a lot of time in the New Testament as well. It's amazing to me how often in the New Testament you find the concept of waiting on the Lord without the words even being there. This is actually what we're called to as believers as we walk with the Lord. So a lead passage that we might consider is Proverbs 20:22. It says, "Do not say, I will repay evil." So this is a warning, this is a proverb. "Wait for the Lord, and he will deliver you." Consider this passage in Psalm 25:3. "Indeed, none who wait for you," a prayer to the Lord, "will be put to shame. They will be ashamed who are wantonly treacherous." And we'll talk about what that word means in just a little bit. I had to look it up. Psalm 37:9 and verse 34. "For the evildoers will be cut off," the idea being from the land, "but those who wait for the Lord will inherit the land." And then finally in Psalm 106 in verses 13 and 14. "But they soon forgot his works. They did not wait." So here we get an opposite example of what it means to not wait. They did not wait for his counsel, but they had a wanton craving. There's our term again. "In the wilderness, and put God to the test in the desert." Now these passages are representative of what we would find throughout the Old Testament, even into the New Testament. And they're representative for the ways I would like us to think about what this concept of waiting on the Lord means. And so I'm going to highlight these significant points that I hope will help us in understanding what it means for us in our own journey to wait on the Lord. So the first point is this: in each passage, there is the presence of something unwanted. Now that can vary in degree, just like the presence of something unwanted can vary in different degrees in our lives as well. We usually, when we're waiting, we are in the presence of something that's unwanted. So as we think about these passages, either a wrong has been committed, which has put someone in a difficult position, or a person has simply encountered a difficulty in life, but they're up against something in the life that they're living. When you're in a bad place, what do you want? When you're in a place of difficulty where life is craving in, what do you want? You want out. You want relief. You want deliverance. And we're going to find that as we look at these passages, they want the same things that we want. So as a result, they want relief or deliverance from that which is unwanted. They're in this situation and they want out of that. Now, the issue is, what do we do in the choices that we make to get out of this situation? What is our response? So let's think about this for just a moment. Again, going back to Proverbs 20:22. You have to read between the lines in this particular passage to get the situation. But this proverb is a warning to one who has been wronged. So here's a person, a wrong has been committed toward this person. So this warning, do not repay evil, is given because, it's understood, a human being like you or me, the natural propensity in that particular situation would be to repay the wrong that's been committed. We don't know how bad the evil is in this particular situation. We don't have a context, but we can fill in the blanks. We can put a situation in there. But it's the type that could be felt. In fact, whatever it was that would be happening in a situation like this, it is what leads to this warning. Don't do it. You don't want to go in this particular direction. The longing would be to repay the one who has committed this evil. That's the natural inclination. And the goal of that repaying would be to ultimately feel better. It's a way out of the difficulty. You do this to me, I'll do it to you, and then there's a sense of feeling better in that sense. You've put me in a bad place, but I can get back at you. Or if I could just blank, then my world would be made right and I would feel better. That would bring me relief. The logic is that the revenge will bring satisfaction because the wrong will have been righted. And that's foolish thinking. But it's so oftentimes the way we operate. I don't know how many times growing up my parents heard the word, "He did it first." So we're in the other room and my brother hits me. I didn't have to consider my options of what to do at that moment. I didn't have to think, well, I could, talk my way out of this. I could be kind and do what Jesus would do. My natural inclination was to hit my brother, hit him back. There was something about that made me feel better, mostly. Because in the deepest parts of who we are, for me to take life into my hands in that kind of way, it's not going to bring that deepest sense of satisfaction. And as I was moving in that direction, I didn't walk around and look internally and weep and grieve over the man I was becoming. I just did it. I just hit him. I just hit him back. I pursued it with all my might. And we all know what it's like to be wronged in various situations, to want justice, or even more broadly, just to be in a difficult place and we want to get out of it. And that's what really drives this point home for us. We know what it's like to be in the presence of something unwanted, where we continue to feel it. We're never going to escape that this side of heaven. This is going to be an experience that we have throughout our life. We know the pain. We know the difficulty of living. It's inescapable this side of heaven. Difficulty abounds in this world, and you all have your stories. Probably many of you in this room are in the presence of something unwanted. Just think about some of the situations in my life. My dad has stage 4 cancer. Marriages that I know of that are headed for divorce. Friends that I have that, in a sense, are dying of leukemia. Multiple dystrophies that inhibit one's mobility. A damaged heart that needs a transplant. Bankruptcy. Parents in pain because their children have walked away from the Lord. Facing manslaughter in a court case. One who was falsely accused of abuse. Another who was sexually abused. Racism. The emergence of paranoid schizophrenia in a husband. I mean, these situations abound, and you know what this is like to walk in this way. You know what it's like to just want relief, to just want deliverance, just want it, whatever that it is, to be over. And we know theologically, Lord, help. We know Psalm 121. I will look into the hills. Where does my help come from? It comes from the Lord. But what if the Lord delays? What if the Lord doesn't respond in a way? What if the cancer does take someone's life? What if the marriage does end? What's to be our response in the midst of all of that? How do we bear under that and look to the Lord? Now, I want us again to consider our definition of waiting on the Lord, the very last little line, even though the difficulty may not subside, because that could be a reality for us. Whatever it is that we find ourselves in that's unwanted, a wrong done to us, or just a situation, a reality for us may be that it doesn't go away. If we make deliverance, getting out of it, our final goal, we're walking in foolishness. We cannot control the difficulty when it begins or when it ends. It just happens. It just is. It's just the world that we live in. We can only control how we respond to it. And that's what these passages in scriptures want to point us toward. We have to embrace what we're in because it may not go away. But how can we live in a way that honors the Lord? That's the question we need to keep in front of us. How do we wait? So let's look at our second point to continue to move in that direction. In each of these passages that I looked at in the Old Testament, the persons have concluded to some degree. In other words, they're in difficulty, and now they've drawn some kind of conclusion what it is that will bring them relief or deliverance, and then pursue it. Or they want to pursue it, they have the desires, or it's simply assumed that when this happens, natural tendency is to do this. It's just the way of humanity. It's just what people do when they find themselves in these kinds of situations. The persons have a clear sense of what is going to make their world better. Ultimately, what they have there is a commitment to take matters into their own hands. This is my life. I know this situation. I can deal with it. I can fix this. I can make it better. If I just had blank then, or if I just did blank then, it would all work out. They look to whatever fills in those blanks. They look at that and they say, deliver me, for thou art my God. I can deal with this situation. I can fix it. I can make this work. I can make this better. Again, considering our passages that we've been looking at in Proverbs 22, let's watch this. Do not say, I will repay evil, Wait for the Lord, and he will deliver you. Proverbs 20:22 demonstrates this so clearly. The deliverance would be what? It would be to repay evil. Someone did evil to me. My deliverance will be found in repaying evil, to get back at the one who did wrong. It's to take matters into one's own hands rather than leave that to the Lord. The conviction of the heart again is, I can fix this on my own. I can do this. I can hit my brother back. And having established the direction of this perceived deliverance, people will pour all their passions into it. I want deliverance, and I want it now. When you get to Psalm 106, to use that as an example, it provides us with this whole psalm provides us with a number of wrong directions of the heart. It summarizes the history of Israel. It's an incredible psalm to look through and read. And verse 14 states that they had a wanton craving in the wilderness. This wanton craving. Well, again, what is wanton craving? Think about this for a moment. Wanton craving is a craving without regard for what is right. It's unrestrained, excessive, malicious, unjustifiable, deliberate, and without motive, unprovoked. In other words, think about it this way. It is an action without any regard for the Lord. It's living as if the Lord is not. And that's what ultimately taking matters into your own hands is. It's, I may know theologically that there is a Lord, that there is a God who exists, but I'm going to put my fingers in my ears. I'm not going to pay attention to who he is. I'm going to live as if he is not. I want it now, and I can make this happen. In the New American Standard Bible, in Psalm 106, instead of wanton craving, it says, craved intensely. There's passion behind that. And people just pour their heart in a direction. It's simply taking matters into their own hands. But what does it look like? Think about for Israel. Now, for each of these illustrations, as you go through the verses that follow this warning about wanton craving, there's a backstory to each one of these lines. Verse 16, envying the Lord's chosen leader, Moses. Verse 19, turning one's hearts toward idols. Verses 24 to 25, despising and grumbling. These are all code words that take you back to the story of Israel, and you can find a backstory. Verse 28, more turning one's hearts toward idols. Verse 32, provoking the Lord by not trusting. Verse 34, failing to obey. In other words, that disregard for what is right. Choosing a direction, a path away from the Lord, instead choosing their own way. Verses 35 to 39, becoming like the nations. Instead of living holy lives unto the Lord, do you see the sense of living as if the Lord is not? We can find our own way. We can make this work. We know how to live. In the context of each one of these verses that you see listed up there is a wrong reaction to a situation of difficulty. Israel encounters a problem, and then they look for a solution. And they have an understanding of what it is that will bring them relief or what it is that will get them out of that difficulty. And it's a solution that does not involve the Lord. It takes matters into their own hands. I can fix this, and I will fix it, and I'll do it now. And each situation that is encountered here is such that they would naturally want a quick solution. They're in the desert, they're thirsty, and they're grumbling. What do you want when you're in the desert and you're thirsty? You want water. And if you're there long enough, you'll do whatever it takes to get water. They find themselves in these kind of situations. And the inclination of the heart can be disposed toward taking matters into your own hands. And we all know what it is like, to some degree or another, to want to repay evil. We all know what that's like. We all know to some degree what it means to take matters in our own hands, to look for relief in such a way that we live as if God is not. We just want satisfaction. We just want it to feel good. We just want it, whatever it is, to be over. We know the sins of turning away from the Lord and seeking to find life apart from him, looking at the solution and say, deliver me, for thou art my God. God seems absent, and we want relief now. He doesn't seem to care, and we want a solution. It seems like God has turned away. He's just not paying attention. Maybe he's on vacation, whatever it might be. He's lost his grip when it comes to our situation, and something needs to be done now. To whatever degree that we know this is true in our lives, we've got to own it. We've got to own these realities of our hearts. We've got to be honest about our state of being. We've got to sit in the presence of the Lord and allow the Holy Spirit and invite others into our stuff so that we can see our own hearts honestly, so that we can be convicted, so that we can turn away from these kind of things. Your integrity, your humility will be required for you to be able to face what your wanting craving is in your life. The Holy Spirit will have to help you. And perhaps you know, even recently, some of the stuff that's there in your own heart, just like Israel had their stuff. And maybe you've been in situations where you just want to look to your gods, deliver me. Or you move away from the Lord and live as if he doesn't exist. You just want to right your world to have relief now. We demand it now. We take matters in our own hands. We have our own wanton cravings. And so we have to think about that. What are your wanton cravings? You're up against it. You've got this difficulty, something unwanted. The presence is right there. And then your heart can move in a direction, a craving without regard for what is right, thinking in terms of being obedient to the Lord and following him, a craving without regard for what is right, unrestrained, excessive, malicious, unjustifiable, deliberate, without motive, unprovoked, taking matters in your own hands without regard for the Lord. Think about what we might encounter in our own life. We overeat. We indulge ourselves in sexual fantasy. We lie to protect ourselves from being found out. We promote ourselves for our own exaltation. We malign others for our advantage to make ourselves look good. We criticize in order to flaunt our own knowledge. We drink to take a little bit of the edge off in what we're up against. We go into ministry hoping to find significance. We throw ourselves into ministry because it makes us feel important or powerful. We sacrifice all to make good grades because people think highly of us. We pursue graduate degrees because it brings a level of prestige. We medicate to get us out of our funk. We cheat on an exam so we can do better than we deserve. We cheat on our income taxes because we want more money for ourselves. We embellish our lives because we want others to think highly of us. We post on Facebook so that we can brag just a little bit on ourselves or find empathy. We have extramarital sex thinking we deserve more than our spouse gives us. We have premarital sex hoping the person we're fornicating with will still want us. We hate because our heart wants to destroy. We steal because we want what is not ours. We envy because we want the prestige others have earned. We endlessly watch TV hoping to numb the pain of our lives. We spend hours on the computer to distract us from our present reality. We play video games through the night in order to avoid the responsibilities of life. What is it for you? All these are just quick fixes. I'm up against it in life. I don't like my situation. I know how to fix it. I know what I can do. I just want to feel good. And so we live as if God is not. We take matters into our own hands, and none of them is legitimate. It's all foolishness. Jeremiah 2 summarizes it so well for us. It says, we're simply trying to find water in a broken cistern. A broken cistern that does not hold water. It's taking matters in our own hands without regard for the Lord. But what does all this have to do with waiting on the Lord? Again, I want to go to our third point here. When you are in the midst of difficulty for which you want a way out, To wait on the Lord is to evidence a movement, and here we get into the first part of our definition, to evidence a movement of the heart away from taking matters into our own hands. We've got to move away from that. The teaching is to turn away from such living. As reasonable as it might seem in the moment, as logical as it might seem in the moment, as natural as it might seem to move in that direction, we have so much habitual activity in our life. We just go in a direction. And the warning of Scripture is, you don't want to go there. Again, let's think about the passages that we've been looking at in our time here. Again, Proverbs 20:22. Do not say, I will repay evil. Wait for the Lord, and he will deliver you. The writer of Proverbs is stating, do not have that kind of heart, the kind that extends evil toward another, the kind that takes matters into your own hands. The plea is to turn away from that, and then to do what? Well, we're going to talk more about that next week. You wait on the Lord. He will deliver you. But the first part of waiting is to turn away from that. And the opposite of being a person who repays evil, who takes matters into his own hands, is a person who waits on the Lord. And so again, when we think about this, when you are in difficulty and you want a way out, to wait on the Lord is to turn away from taking matters in your own hands, or to turn away from seeking your own deliverance, and instead to look to the Lord and the deliverance that he brings. But notice this, in his time and his way, even if the difficulty does not subside. Let's consider again our verses just from this perspective. I'm going to add some words to these verses. Proverbs 20:22. Do not say, I will repay evil. Oh, turn away from that. Wait for the Lord. He will deliver you. And that's what the Proverbs writer is saying. Turn away from that. Look at Psalm 25:3. Indeed, none who wait for you will be put to shame. They will be ashamed who are wantonly treacherous. Oh, turn away from that kind of living. Don't live without regard for what is right. Don't live as if God is not. That's the warning. Psalm 37, for the evildoers will be cut off. Oh, turn away from that. But those who wait for the Lord, they're the ones who will inherit the land. And so again, we think about Psalm 106. But they soon forgot his works. They did not wait for his counsel. But they had a wanton craving in the wilderness and put God to the test in the desert. Oh, turn away from that. Don't live in such a way as that. And again, we see our point here. When you are in difficulty and you want a way out, to wait on the Lord is to turn away from taking matters in your own hands, whatever that might be, to turn away from seeking your own deliverance. Instead, to look to the Lord and the deliverance that he brings in his time, in his way, even if the difficulty does not subside. And so we've got to stop and we've got to think about, do you know your own heart? What does your heart need to turn away from? See, it's easy for us to say, oh yeah, I know what it is to wait on the Lord. But waiting on the Lord is not often what we think it is. It begins with a recognition of our own heart. What does your heart need to turn away from? I found that consistently in these passages. Oh, turn away from that. Don't do that. Why? Because that's the natural inclination of our heart. To what is the Lord calling out to you? Oh, turn away from that. Are you honest and able to identify the idols, whatever that blank is for you? Deliver me, for thou art my God. The things that you passionately pursue for life. Fill in the blank. When I feel lonely, I blank. Is that something you need to turn away from? When I feel afraid, I blank. Is that something you need to turn away from? When I feel sexually aroused, I blank. Is that something you need to turn away from? When I feel inferior and I want others to like me, I blank. Is Is that something you need to turn away from? When I am alone and nobody's watching, the privacy of my life, I blank. Is that something you need to turn away from? When I feel fat and do not like the way my body looks, I blank. Is that something you need to turn away from? When I'm ridiculed, I blank. Is that something you need to turn away from? When I am maligned, when people speak poorly of me, I blank. Is that something you need to turn away from? When I am confronted on an issue in my life, I blank. Is that something you need to turn away from? When I did not study for an exam like I should have, and I can see the answers of the person sitting next to me, I blank. Is that something you need to turn away from? What is it for you? You see, all of us need to be turning away from something. That's the plight of humanity. And the turn away will be a battle for most. It's so habitual. The ways that we live, the movement of our heart in directions, passionately pursuing. It's just so habitual for us. To put it to death seems unwarranted. It seems like an empty command. So, what we have seen so far in this session today is that the pain and difficulty of life is inevitable. We're all going to encounter something that's unwanted. And our natural tendency is to find a way out, living as if God is not. Taking matters in our own hands, finding relief because we want it now. Finding deliverance in our idols, whatever it is we look to and say, deliver me, for thou art my God. And to wait on the Lord, first of all, is to not live in that way. It's to turn away from that. To wait on the Lord is going to be a movement of the heart away from. That's a renouncing of, a repenting of, the destruction of the idols we look to for salvation or for deliverance. The places that we find relief, even though the difficulty may not subside. We turn away from that, even though the difficulty may not subside. Simply put, to wait on the Lord is first a movement of the heart away from taking matters in our own hands. It's a refusal to live as if God is not, to look away from him. What you are turning to when you turn towards those idols is death. It's broken cisterns. They don't hold water. And what awaits you is the fountain of living waters, the only one from whom life comes. And that's only found in God through Christ. And that's where we want to move more towards next week.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.